Hi everyone, Mr. Wader here, and today we're going to be going over the coelacanth and how it relates to marine evolution.
The dead coming back to life sounds scary, but for scientists, it can be a wonderful opportunity. Of course, we're not talking about zombies. Rather, this particular opportunity came in the unlikely form of a large, slow-moving fish called the coelacanth. This oddity dates back 360 million years and was believed to have died out during the same mass extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. To biologists and paleontologists, this creature was a very old and fascinating, but entirely extinct fish, forever fossilized. That is, until 1938, when Marjorie Courtenay-Latimer, a curator at a South African museum, came across a prehistoric-looking, gleaming blue fish hauled up at the nearby docks. She had a hunch that the strange 1.5-meter-long specimen was important, but couldn't preserve it in time to be studied and had it taxidermied. When she finally was able to reach J.L.B. Smith, a local fish expert, he was able to confirm at first sight that the creature was indeed a coelacanth. But it was another 14 years before a live specimen was found in the Comoros Islands, allowing scientists to closely study a creature that had barely evolved in 300 million years.
Yes, a living fossil.
A living fossil. Decades later, a second species was found near Indonesia. The survival of creatures thought extinct for so long proved to be one of the biggest discoveries of the century. But the fact that the coelacanth came back from the dead isn't all that makes this fish so astounding. Even more intriguing is the fact that genetically and morphologically, the coelacanth has more in common with four-limbed vertebrates than almost any other fish, and its smaller genome is ideal for study. This makes the coelacanth a powerful link between aquatic and land vertebrates, a living record of their transition from water to land millions of years ago. The secret to this transition is in the fins. While the majority of ocean fish fall into the category of ray-finned fishes, coelacanths are part of a much smaller, evolutionarily distinct group with thicker fins, known as lobe-finned fish. 6 of the coelacanth's fins contain bones organized much like our limbs, with one bone connecting the fin to the body, another 2 connecting the bone to the tip of the fin, and several small finger-like bones at the tip. Not only are those fins structured in pairs to move in a synchronized way, the coelacanth even shares the same genetic sequence that promotes limb development in land vertebrates. So although the coelacanth itself isn't a landwalker, its fins do resemble those of its close relatives, who first hauled their bodies onto land with the help of these sturdy, flexible appendages, acting as an evolutionary bridge to the landlubbers that followed. So that's how this prehistoric fish helps explain the evolutionary movement of vertebrates from water to land. Over millions of years, that transition led to the spread of all four-limbed animals, called tetrapods, like amphibians, birds, and even the mammals that are our ancestors. There's even another powerful clue, in that unlike most fish, coelacanths don't lay eggs, instead giving birth to live young pups, just like mammals. And this prehistoric fish will continue to provide us with fascinating information about the migration of vertebrates out of the ocean over 300 million years ago. A journey that ultimately drove our own evolution, survival, and existence. Today, the coelacanth remains a symbol of the wondrous mysteries that remain to be uncovered by science. With so much left to learn about this fish, the ocean depths, and evolution itself, who knows what other well-kept secrets our future discoveries may bring to life?
Okay, so at this point, you should be able to see now why I have these 3 pictures up here. The one at the top is the one that inspired the video for today. It's a picture from Animal Crossing. Bottom left is the Pokemon, which didn't evolve, which makes perfect sense after seeing the video, right? Because now you know that the coelacanth didn't evolve for millions of years, and conveniently the Pokemon doesn't evolve either. So, good job by Nintendo on that one. And then on the bottom right, there's a picture of the actual coelacanth alive. So this is kind of crazy because if you think about where the 2 different ones that were found that they referenced in the video, the first one is found in the Comoros Islands, which is all the way on the left there, just off southern Africa. It's in between Africa, like major, like the land, and then Madagascar. And then you travel over 5,000 miles to Indonesia, and that was where the other specimen was found. So apparently, these slow moving fish that live in caves have a couple of different species spread out by a very large geographical distance. This would most likely lead you to expect that they must be pretty different in those two different sections. And the reality is that they're pretty similar to each other, and they're more separate from most fish than they are from tetrapods and other animals that have four limbs. And just because the geographic distance was really far here does not mean that the genetic distance between them and other things is very large. So if you take a look at the picture on the left there, we're at the top there, humans. And if you scroll down to bottom third, the top of the bottom third of that picture says coelacanth lungfish. And then you'll notice after that, everything gets a lot less fishy. You have frogs, lizards, turtles, then you get the birds, then you get the mammals, and then at the top of it, well, we're mammals, so we're there. And then at the bottom, you have fish. That is basically a family tree for evolution. And do we have all of this absolutely like nailed down 100%, absolutely know exactly what order everything evolved in? Well, no, obviously not. But animals like the coelacanth help us fill in the gaps, and they help us figure out what order things evolved in. And on the bottom right there, you have another model showing a similar idea. It's a modified cladogram. Basically, it's showing you the names of the type of organisms, and it's showing you the thing that separates them, or the differentiation event, the thing that they evolved that separates them. On the bottom right there, you can see that bony vertebrates split off into lobe-finned fish and ray-finned fish. And the coelacanth, although it's a fish, is more closely related to tetrapods because that's the branch that it's on evolutionarily. And you can even see that because right here on the left side, the coelacanth is parallel to the entire branch for everything at the top. And then the rest of the fish are in a separate branch that's parallel to the coelacanth's branch. So coelacanth is in the same branch as all these things up here. It's not in the same branch as all the ones down here. And that would be useful to us if we could find the things that are connecting them. Why is the coelacanth more like a human evolutionarily than it is like the other fish there? How are they more similar? Well, they have a couple of unique adaptations that make them similar. Their fins, and you can even see it, their fins aren't shaped like a regular fish fin. They're not just a flat mass that moves back and forth. They actually have a section that almost looks like finger sections that protrude out from it. And just like they showed you in that first video there, you can actually look at the bones that are there, and they grow in a similar manner to the way your fingers grow, attached to your hand, attached to your arm. So they're really good as a model organism for figuring out how did we get from water to land. And it's hard to find them. And when they're found, researchers kind of go nuts because it's like finding treasure in the sea. They live in deep caves and rocky reefs, and they hide in caves. They don't move all that fast compared to lots of other fish. And they struggle in a number of different ways to keep up in the environments that they live in, but they're a testament to the fact that some designs are really effective. They have been around for millions of years and haven't gone anywhere. They're still around. There's a couple of different species of them as well. They are endangered, and part of the reason why they're being studied so heavily is also because they're trying to conserve them, because if we lose the last living ones, all of the secrets that they hold will be lost forever, because a fossil will only do so much for you. Being able to watch them live does a lot of different things for the researchers. It helps us learn things we couldn't otherwise learn. So, they are often called living fossils, and the picture at the top there is an actual fossil of a coelacanth. It's an imprint fossil, meaning part of it is preserved, but it's not living, and it's obviously not whole, meaning you may have a nice artistic rendering of it imprinted there for you, but you're not going to be able to check and see how it interacts with its environment very well. Anyways, they spend daylight hours hiding in caves and other dark spaces, and they hunt other smaller fish, squids, other invertebrates at night. Them and the lungfishes make up a group known as lobe-finned, and you can even see it. They have a different shaped fin. Fins are attached to short limbs, just like they mentioned in the video there, and their species are the closest fish relatives to tetrapods. Lobe-finned fishes are more closely related to tetrapods than to other fish, and live coelacanths have been observed using their lobe fins in a paddle-like fashion, almost like they are trying to walk through the water using their fins as like hands, like how you would swim. You use your hands and your arms to push you through the water when you swim. So the video might be a little bit choppy here, but what we are looking at is National Geographic recording of scuba divers going down looking for coelacanths and other deep sea fish, and they find a coelacanth, and it's not the prettiest looking fish. It looks a lot like a dinosaur in a lot of ways, and it looks a lot like prehistoric animals that would have lived in the water. And the reason for that is because they lived at the same time. Like they had mentioned earlier in the previous video, they had been thought to be extinct because they had found fossils and never seen living coelacanths. And if all you can find in the fossil record is fish that are of the age of dinosaurs from now, like going backwards in time, you would expect they're extinct. So imagine that those little discoveries were never made. Imagine nobody finds these. So we don't have this link between marine life and life on land now. There's a pretty big difference in the way that we have to tell the history of evolution if we are missing this massive, important detail showing that their fins do things similar to our hands. And the fact that they're more similar to lots of things living on land than they are to lots of things living in the water. So, the final part to this story is the lab that I worked in when I was in college. We worked with a protein called phytin, which was discovered in the wings of fruit flies, and it was called phytin because proteins end with IN usually at the end of it, like myosin, trypsin, etc. And it was required for flight. Well, that makes sense for fruit flies, but it was also discovered in about 70 species of hexapods. And you've got all these other fun things here. You've got insect orders like silverfish, roaches, grasshoppers, lice, bugs, beetles, lacewings, bees, ants, wasps, moths, flies, and mosquitoes. Okay, well, most of those make sense, right? Because those are insects or things that are related to insects. They live above ground. Some of them fly around, and a bunch of them have wings even if they don't fly. Okay, yeah, makes perfect sense. Except we also found that they existed in crustaceans, like brine shrimp, pillbugs, amphipods, lobsters, crabs, shrimps, water fleas, all these things that don't fly. So just like the coelacanth, we were able to see that there were some things that were set up in place before you got to the flies that were flying. So this matters because this is a general trend. This is a pattern that emerges in a bunch of different places in evolutionary biology, and you're looking for mechanisms that exist before the thing itself is used. I'm sure if you've ever been a fan of a sports team, there have been players on a team that weren't as effective until somebody else made it onto the team, and then all of a sudden they're like an entirely different player. You have this resource that isn't being used to the fullest, and then all of a sudden you have a different environment or something change, and now that resource is super valuable. Well, if you look at those crustaceans, they were using that protein to help them move around in the water. And if you didn't know this, water is a fluid, just like air. So we study the dynamics of water similarly to the way we would study the dynamics of air. If you're actually going into engineering, you study fluid dynamics. So one of the things you study is compression of air and hydraulics. And a lot of the stuff that happens in those two systems is similar. There are obviously differences, but the point is that moving through both of those is similar enough where it actually mattered. The mechanisms that were there to make flight possible in insects existed for millions of years before flight existed, and they had existed in the water in places where things don't fly. And the coelacanth similarly had the mechanism to start the transition to land. So there's a lot that we can learn from marine life, and it helps us learn about land animals as well. Who knew that finding this really gross, disgusting looking fish, coelacanth, would help us figure out so much about the world, and especially the evolution from water to land.